Hello, welcome back here to Jerusalem. We've been all over the country, different areas, but still based out of East Jerusalem, which is the Arab, specifically Muslim portion of the city. And we've been wrestling through the narratives, the Israeli narrative and the Palestinian narrative, to better get an understanding of where each are coming from. The other day we were focusing specifically on the Israeli narrative, and even more specifically on the Jewish story that has developed this Israeli narrative in a lot of ways. And we went to the Holocaust Museum here in Jerusalem to understand that even more. And to walk through this place and having heard and seen and experienced, it's just fractions of it, of course, my whole life. And then having been to the one in Washington, D.C., where it kind of culminates with this with the joy of the United States and the Allies coming in and freeing the Jewish people. This one takes a bit of a different tone. And as you walk through this, you can't help but be somber as you know that the people that are standing next to me, shoulder to shoulder in this museum, have family and relatives that were part of this, that were killed in this, and just a very heavy emotional time that you and myself, as I try to engage in this narrative that is different than mine, to fully understand that is really impossible. But at the same time, to walk side by side, to see these pictures, to hear these stories, is one of the great tragedies, obviously, in human history. As we walk through that, we and all the range of emotions that went into that, you begin to see the role that Israel, the land, had for some of these people coming here, thinking this was the place that they could find refuge. And at the end of that Holocaust, there was the discussion, well, where can we put these people? And discussions of Argentina and other places around the world. But they end up here in Israel, what would be considered biblical Israel at the time, obviously, is Palestine. And afterwards, we went into a time of discussion. One of our facilitators is a Jewish Israeli, and we sat in the lawn outside of this museum, and she begins to tell her story of how all four of her grandparents were part of the Holocaust, were in the Holocaust. They all survived, which is miraculous, but how that is integrated into their everyday life. In fact, at their birthdays, every single year, her grandpa comes up, he holds up a glass of wine and toasts and says, look what we've shown the Germans and where we're living now. And so ingrained in this narrative is the story of the past and how they have found a place, how they have overcome their enemies to exist in this place now. Without understanding that portion of the narrative, it's impossible to understand some of the realities and the conflict that lies beneath the surface here in the Middle East. And then going further, we have a Jewish rabbi that began to speak with us, and he focuses on peace and reconciliation and has had incredible story come out of his life as well. And he's a highly esteemed rabbi, but at the same time he's seen some of the injustices that have gone on here among his people, and how do we process through that? And so much of what he articulates is the embracing of the past and not seeing the past hurt as the current reality, but being able to come to a place of what he calls pure and complete suffering, and that leads to pure and complete mourning. And it's only when you come to pure and complete mourning that life can come out of death. And he says that's where some of the issues lie within this Jewish Israel narrative, is that pure and complete mourning has not been completed. In fact, when it hasn't been completed, it shows itself, it manifests itself in a fear and anxiety that begins to oppress other people in a similar way to how they were oppressed earlier in their story. And then the tables were turned a bit to look at ourselves, to look at myself as an American, saying it's this victimization mentality that they can get here, that humans can get in general, that breeds this defensive posture and breeds this entitlement that leads to oppression of others. And if we can't find that pure and complete mourning and move from life, from death to life, then we begin to adopt this mentality of fear and defense that hurts others. In the United States, it brings up the example of 9/11. When we have this pain and suffering that has happened to so many of our family and friends and nation, we need to mourn that. We need to rest in that pain. We need to acknowledge the evil that was done. But we also have to come to a place of complete and pure mourning so we can find life out of death. Because when we take that victim posture, we begin to turn it on others, and we begin to build caricatures of others that are not true based on the internal history of hurt we've had. And that is a convicting word, as we can easily paint this picture of people outside of our context, specifically Muslims or Arabs, people in the Middle East, as all being evil. And that is simply false. It is wrong. And it is just the smallest, thinnest fraction of Arab Muslims that represent what happened to us on that day. And when we begin to create this caricature, then we have ceased to find that complete mourning, and we are ceasing to bring life from death, and we are beginning to create death from life in other people. And it's at that point that there can be no reconciliation, there can be no peace, and we have failed to see the life, and as Christians, the life and hope that we can find in the resurrection of Jesus. And we reject that. Convicting word and powerful day of engaging deeper into this Jewish-Israeli narrative that is so important for us as we begin to transition and look into the Palestinian narrative the next day. And I'll jump in with that more then. Thanks.